I'm Randy Ransom. I'm a principal technical consultant here at Ensighten, and I'm going to walk you through a demonstration of the security, compliance, and consent features of the Privacy MarSec product. On the screen, you'll find a demonstration website we run for our retail demos. You'll see a probably very familiar looking consent experience down here on the bottom of the page. This is very common in many sites, especially with the GDPR mandates that came out a few years ago. It's important to note that a website has to comply with GDPR if they do any business at all in the European Union, and that compliance has to not only give the user, the end user, the ability to consent to their data being used, sold, or collected on the website, but it has to enforce that consent, the choices that they've made. It's not sufficient to simply collect consent and then hope that somewhere down the line the data is not being used or that the user's requests are being honored. Here on the site, you'll see our version of the consent experience. This is a highly mutable, easily changed experience that uses a large variety of the feature set that is available here. You can certainly plug and play these. You do not need to use every single piece. You don't have to have the CCPA portions, for example. You don't need all of the GDPR toggles, for example. If you need to abide by the IAB platform's very strict version of the experience, you certainly can do that as well. If you need to modify the experience for any reason, if you want to look different, feel different for the end user, if you want to place different pieces on different portions of the website, you certainly can. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. As I mentioned previously, it's important to note that the compliance is a necessary part of the consent experience for the end user. Not only do I have to give the user the opportunity to make these choices, opting out of major categories or individual domains, I also have to enforce those choices. When the user opts out of advertising and clicks save, it is not enough that I send a message to my advertisers and tell them that it's not good that you should track Randy anymore. Instead, like our platform does, no longer are advertisers able to send or receive information off of this page or any subsequent pages so long as those user settings are maintained. This is done by what's going on down here under the hood, and the client-side version of the page, we are managing every method that could be used to send a request or receive a request into or out of the page. This is not done at the cookie level. Those are just a data storage medium. This is done at the network level, ensuring that data is not exiting the page to an unintended or an unconsented source, or entering from an unknown location, something that perhaps was a piggyback or a third or fourth party coming in from a vendor that you had approved. It's also important to note that there are many major security benefits that can prevent end users' data from going unexpected places and assist your site and your data by making sure that you are receiving all the data that you intended to, but not unintentional PII, for example. It is very common that a user might use form fills to accidentally fill a field with a unintended PII. They might click the name field and accidentally click, say, their social security number. JavaScript is very easy and very capable of picking up any form field data and sending it anywhere it's available to do so. I will populate these fields with some sample data. And as you can see, I've included several pieces of PII. In the website column, I've accidentally selected a social security number, and down in the comment, for some reason, I've typed something that would abide by a simple version of a credit card at regular expression or lookup. If, for example, JavaScript, malicious or benign, were on the page trying to gather form field data, it would be rather easy to pick up and send off the page to an unintended location without something that manages the privacy of the client side. It's very common, and has been for a long time, that content is protected at the server level, down at the edge level, where you're not sure or you're not capable of knowing what might be happening on the client level. We want to make sure that the user, whether because they brought something in with them as part of a plugin, or under the worst case kind of scenario where, say, a mage card attack or journey hijacking attempts we're going through, we want to make sure that they are protected on the client level as well, or something that came in from the client side and exited through the client side never really got anywhere near, say, your servers or your databases. I'm going to jump over to the UI and show you how we put this together. Here in the UI, we construct what's called a series of gateways, and this can be something like DevStage prod, or UK prod versus US prod, or something entirely global if you have more or less needs. It's really entirely up to what you want to put into place. Inside of our production gateway, we create a couple of very important settings, the enforcement modes and the blocking modes. The enforcement modes names are very straightforward. Observe is an observation mode. It does not enforce user choices. It's mostly beneficial for your setup period. This is going a long way to helping you construct the experience for the user and decide what goes into any given list. Enforce, just like it sounds, is where you add all of the teeth, where you add the enforcement to the product. User choices are enforced when the user opts out of advertising, advertisers stop receiving data. The user lands on a website and is immediately opted out if they are detected to be inside of, say, a GDPR relevant country. Blocking modes are usually strict to allow list. This is because you want to cut down the number of accidental content that's arriving on the website. The allow list says that these are the 10 vendors, the 10 domains or whatever that you want on your website, and blocks out of hand or purposefully everything that's not on that list. Block list is the opposite. It's saying that I really hate these 4 vendors or their 4 domains, but everybody else, known or unknown, is going to be allowed onto my website. This is not usually a good plan for strict consent and compliance, but it is an option if that's something you're really planning on doing for your own website. In the context of lists, you build these lists, the allow list, and then the consentable categories down here in this screen. You'll see the always allowed section. This is content that the user's not allowed to opt out of, things that are mandatory or required for your site to simply function. And below that, you'll see 3 similar names from the experience before when I was showing you here. These are the consent categories. Now, you certainly don't have to use these 3. You can use more or less of them, different names with different content. This is configured partially automated, but also by hand by either yourself or our services team. Any of those would work. We want you to place content in these lists that are relevant to your website. We don't want you to put into an allow list, say, a major analytics platform that you're not using, and then accidentally send data somewhere that you're not paying for and maybe help someone who's not you. On the left side, we see the domains that need to be categorized list. This is the major automated piece of this window where we're seeing content appears in this table automatically so long as it did not already exist on this right side on either of these 2 sections. This functions through any live gateway. So long as a gateway is live, and it's usually the major benefit of observe mode, it will start gathering data that is not already listed in some capacity. Then you'll be able to get through this long list saying, oh yes, I have 135 domains. Oh, I forgot about Google Analytics. I better put them into my analytics category. But who is blah.com? That seems problematic. Maybe I should investigate how that got onto my site in the first place. It's also where our ML and AI, as machine learning and artificial intelligence, will come into play. This, if you are not familiar with the entries here in this domains category, especially if you have a long list of them, some major sites like publishers may have 1,000 or more entries, and there will be tons of entries that you may have never seen before. The suggestions or the recommendations will assist you in not only discovering potentially where that domain comes from, but what category it might belong in. Come back to the securities tab here in just a moment. The environments, user consent, and translations tab is used for deciding who or maybe where the user is, what portions of the experience they're going to see, and what that experience might look like. So the environment section is saying who or where the user is. Maybe you have multilingual concerns for a GDPR-based implementation. So we have our example, English versus German. You'll see those down in the translation tabs as well, English and German. Might also be something like you detected they were in California, or that they are maybe more simply in a GDPR country or not in a GDPR country. And under those stipulations, maybe you're making decisions like they should see a reduced version of the experience. Maybe they need to see the IB version of the experience. If they're in California, certainly they need to see the CCPA version of the experience. And just as importantly, especially for GDPR, you must be able to guarantee that the user is opted out, that their data is not being collected by default for compliance and consent in GDPR regulated countries. This means that when you land on a website, it is not enough to collect data and then send the data elsewhere and then hope that the endpoint won't use it because the user opted out. They should have no collection the moment they land. This is very important for actual compliance with the regulations. In the translations, as you saw, you get to decide what portions and what the user's looking at. Back up in the securities tab, these are additional or optional features, only one of which is turned itself on automatically, and that's when you use the enforcement mode. Require SSL is an additional enhancement to standard browser functionality that would disable or warn against insecure content being loaded first party to a secure page. CSS protection is a niche exfiltration attack where it's possible to send data through CSS background images This can be closed off by the product, but it also messes with your UX team's ability to manipulate the site. Clickjacking is a more commonly known term as journey hijacking, very popular in the retail space a few years ago and still happens to this day. And turning this protection on monitors and modifies the active DOM, or the HTML of the page, to make sure that URLs are not being added to the user's experience that are not on an existing list. This means that if, say, they had some of the plugins that come with popular browsers these days that might say, oh, I found this pair of pants for half off somewhere else, well, you can turn that off. You can make sure that they're not going to get that, little pop-up advertisement that loses you a customer. In the service worker beta, this enhances the simple feature set that is already in existence to make sure that it has even more reach and more options by enabling or employing service workers on the page. In the data governance section, you'll find something that I mentioned earlier where I was talking about I do want some of my vendors to get data, but I want to make sure they don't get certain sensitive data purposefully or accidentally. Data governance is how you decide that it's very important to me that my analytics vendor gets data that's very valuable to my business. But I'd rather they didn't get credit card numbers, plain text email addresses, social security numbers, or anything that I might be able to uniquely identify with a pattern or regular expression. This is where you can strip out, say, masking or redact any of that content from a detected URL, but still send that modified version on so you're not losing valuable data if a user, like me, had accidentally placed PII into a form field, for example. The performance section is an enhancement to the existing privacy product's functionality in that it can monitor and detect the SLAs, or the time to loads, for any product or any vendor or any content passing through it as part of the page. This means that if for whatever reason a particular vendor at, say, 123slowads.com were loading very slowly, you might be able to come in here and say, well, if anything takes longer than 2 seconds to load, that's a problem for me and my website. I'm going to go ahead and shut that down. I'm going to reject requests for the specific end user for a brief period of time, and I will notify or flag my endpoints, say my client here, this demo retail account, that I've done so. Finally, in the advanced section, as you can see here, we have a strong eye towards customization and flexibility. We want to make sure that if you need to do things before, during, or after the privacy product is doing its work on the page, you can certainly do so. We want to make sure that you can change up the look and feel. You can do that here in the standard tagging section. If you want to do it on the page in your regular style sheets, you certainly can. If you're not a fan of our cookies, you don't like how long or short they are, you certainly can change those. And if you have external notification, maybe you want to react to user actions. You want to let the user opt into analytics and immediately react by sending a beacon off to your analytics platform and let them know that the user opted in. Backing up here, we have a couple of built-in BI reports. We have consent and block. Consent is an obfuscated measurement of consent going on your site or sites. This is obfuscated because we as a third party should not be collecting user data without their consent, just like the rest of the world. And so we've got, say, 98% of all users in your German environment opt in or out. Your English users only 65, and this is the the volume of users seeing what portions of the experience. The block report, we do have some great granular data showing that I landed on, say, the home page 48,000 times, and I saw these 30 vendors all 48,000 times, and I chose to block or not block them for XYZ reasons. Maybe they were not on the list, perhaps the user had opted out of their category, or maybe I modified a request because of data governance routines like I showed you previously. Observe report is the same as block, but for the observation mode, and CCPA reports are if and only if you are using those CCPA links and gathering data there. I'm going to back up to the website and run some simple scripts to show off what I mean when I'm talking about the security pieces and the necessary collection of data. I'm going to run a couple of scripts that I've bookmarked here. These are all simple JavaScript, a few lines apiece that I've put into bookmarks just to save myself time and effort. Down in the console, you'll see some chatter about what they're doing and then what they attempt to do, and then we'll take a look at how far they got. First, we're going to look at a list of what privacy saw going on the page. As you can see here, this is a list of content that passed through privacy that was blocked or may have taken too long and thrown an error. And we can see a number of lists here say, this was blocked for whitelisted reasons. This was blocked for SSL or secure socket layer based reasons. This was modified for a monitoring reason. Say it probably spotted a social security number, just like I've showed in the previous screen. Here we see an attempted PII theft. This is a script I wrote to assist me in demonstrating that it is very quick and easy for JavaScript to check things on the page, to pull information out. As you can see, all of that form field data pops up down here and then is attempted to be sent out through the network log. But as we can see here in the empty network log, just after I ran this script, it is not present. And that's because, as we may see in the previous script, it now appears here at the bottom, both scrubbed for monitoring and then blocked for listing reasons. This does not appear on the list and therefore is not allowed on the page. This demonstration script also included an attempt at loading a piggybacked file or a fourth party tag. We can see that also appears down here in the list. Finally, I can also show that I added a keylogger down into this field, which would be easy, just as I showed in the previous lists, to send off the page. But once again, these are being blocked without the successful attempt at being sent off the page. This has been a quick demonstration of the privacy, consent, and compliance tools and features. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.